Hey everyone, welcome to part 2 of our Intro to R video series. So we're going to be talking about what makes R an object-oriented programming language, and then show you a few different ways to make objects, as well as some other important features of RStudio. So to begin, an object is a way of describing any sort of value, data. It can also be known as a variable, but essentially you're naming any sort of value of interest in R that you can then call up later. And so that might sound a little abstract right now, but I'll show you what I mean. So say we have an object we want to call X. We can set that equal, and this symbol I just pulled up looks like a caret and a dash. I do this on a Mac by using Option dash, but I think on a Windows, it's probably like Command dash. But essentially, this is just saying X equals, and let's say we want it to equal 2. So you run this code, and R basically makes this object called X, and it knows that it's equal to 2. So later, if we wanted to call up X, we could hit run, and R knows that this is equivalent to 2. You can also set it equal to various values. So say I want a string of numbers associated with it. So we do this, I run it, and now we have a series of numbers associated with X. And this might be nice if you're, wanting to take the log of all 4 numbers. You could just go log X, and then it'll give you the answer for that. You could also attach a string. So I'm going to call it my favorite ice cream. And my favorite ice cream is pistachio. So I just give it this response. And now we have a value over here called my favorite ice cream. We can see that it's a character and it's pistachio. So if I were to call up my favorite ice cream, R would say, yeah, it's pistachio. It really knows me. So one thing I want to point out with this object thing is that R will complete or can complete when you are typing a word out, which is really helpful. So say, I really want to remember what my favorite ice cream is. I can just start typing the object name, and R has auto-populated what it is. So I just hit enter, it pulls it up, and again, I can run it to remember, oh yeah, it's pistachio. What's kind of cool is, say I start typing, so I have an M. Okay, well, that one's not working. But say I want to, Excel's not working. Okay, what if I'm wondering, EXP? I start typing it in, R auto-populates, hey, look at all these options that you could mean. Do you mean, some sort of logarithm or exponential, because this is the function for that? Or maybe I actually just want an expression, and here's the function for that. And R will then give you information about each of those functions. So this is a really handy tool as you get, later in your programming, and you have a bunch of different objects or data frames. Using this tab completion will come in handy. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is object naming conventions. So the biggest takeaway from this section is, no matter what, you really just try to be consistent with how you name things. You'll thank yourself later. So or maybe you noticed before, I started typing my objects with these underscores between each of the words, and that's so that there's no space. And it also differentiates my object naming system from anything else in my code, because I personally know that I label things typically with underscores. Another way to do it is you could do something in title case. So instead of underscores, I go my favorite ice cream, and I've capitalized F. So either one works, just choose which one you prefer and stay consistent with that. The next area I want to cover is regarding help files. I use this function all the time. So what you can do is type a question mark and then say, I'm really curious about log. You can type that in, just log, run enter, and the help page will pull up for the specific function that I wrote the question mark in front of. And it gives you a description, shows you how to use it, the arguments inside of that function, and then a bunch of information. I typically scroll down to the bottom and look at the examples because you can learn a lot just from that. You can also do a double quote. And this pulls up some additional information that you might want to look at. I also Google search functions all the time, and there's typically a lot of helpful information out there. So we're getting close here. We have 2 more sections I want to cover in this video. So this next one is gonna also deal with log as an example, but essentially what this is getting at is there's various arguments that you're going to place inside of a function potentially. And so say when I type log, R populates, hey, there's 2 different arguments that are within this function. You can have a value X, and you can also specify a base value. So if I were to just do log of 3, this is basically saying to R, hey, X is equal to 3, and then can you keep the base that is the standard for this function? And then you get that response. So to prove this to you, I'll also just run this and show you that, in fact, you get the same answer both times. And this is the argument part of it. So you're basically saying X is equal to this. Please run that. I think it's really helpful when you first start programming to actually show what your arguments are, because it helps in your mind just keep track of what you're asking R to do. And eventually, you might just want to be like, I know the log function really well. I'm not worried about it. I'm just going to put in numbers because I know the order of operations here. So you can do that, and R will still know how to run it, and it will give you an answer. But it's nice to be able to look at both and really understand what you're telling R to do. So we'll go through this a lot more throughout our Davis, but this is a simple example of how to show that. So the last thing I want to talk about are errors, warnings, and messages. So when you get an error, this basically means R is not able to run the function or the code that you're telling it to run. And so an example of this could be log of my favorite ice cream. So I put this in and we get an error, non-numeric argument to mathematical function. And this is basically saying, hey, I can't take the log of something that isn't numeric, so I can't run this. But if we did say the log of -2, it runs, but we get this warning message. It's saying, hey, log of -2 is an NA. And so warnings are kind of, in a way, potentially more insidious than errors, because your code will still run, even though there might be a problem associated with it. So warnings can be okay, but the important part to remember is if it's a problem, look into it. And if it's not a problem, then you can move forward, but really assess what that warning is telling you before just moving directly on. The last thing I want to say are messages. So messages are not a warning or an error, but could be more like informational. So, R has packages updating all the time. And so we might learn how to code something a certain way, but then maybe that package goes out and there's actually a new way to call up a function. R might warn you like, hey, instead of this, now use this in the future. So those are really just informational. Okay, that is it for this section. Thanks for hanging in with me. And good luck. Have fun playing around and testing out all these different things. And if you have more questions or want to learn more about this, go to the R Davis website and you'll find some more information there.